that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Thanks, son.
Well, right now we have 3 board members, so we do not have a quorum.
Art just got here. I'm gonna let him in.
Paul, you can see me now, correct?
Yes, I can,
Yes, we
John.
can,
Thank you. Thank
And you're
you.
looking good.
always.
Thank you.
Hello, Art.
Hi, darling.
Hello,
How are
Art.
you?
Hey, Art. Hey,
And
Mike.
there's Mike.
There's Mike.
Mike's on mute.
Hello,
Hi, Mike.
And
Hey, Mike.
how are you?
Good.
Good.
Rita, thanks for taking the time to go through the website. I know it's been a lot of work, but I just started looking at it yesterday and noticed those things were kind of off.
When is the new one coming up, Ron?
The new website will go live supposedly at the end of the month. I'm not sure the exact date. It's still a bit of a work in progress. There's some things I know on our page that need to be rearranged a little bit. Rita's been working on that.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot different. So rearranging every page takes a little bit of extra attention.
Now that I've just gotten used to the old one.
Yep, it'll be new.
Wow.
Hey,
Evening,
Ron, do
Peter.
you think as we work through the COVID shots and everything else, eventually town hall will open?
Is Joe.
Absolutely, it will eventually. I can't predict when that will be though.
I
Yeah.
think town hall is scheduled to open the first week of April.
April Fool's Day, terrific.
It's either April 1st or the first week.
Thank goodness.
Did you say town hall would be open?
That is the plan that I saw today.
Does that mean for boards and committees as well as for the town council?
I don't know. I think the council is planning to hold its first meeting at the beginning of April. The council would be at the town hall, but you wouldn't be able to allow the public in at that.
Yeah, the public is still Zooming,
Yes.
but nothing was said at the meeting about boards and committees.
I just saw it in an email today, so
Okay.
I'm sure that's, part of the process that they'll be talking about the next couple of weeks.
I have 5:58, so we have less than 2 minutes before we call the meeting to order.
Hey, Paul, Peter, I know I came in late on that conversation, but I watched it painfully. I watched a couple of the council meetings and it was painful, but that's beside the point. I guess the question is I see as they vote without, they all raise their hands, so they don't have to do the roll call for everything. Is that something we can get away with?
Well, I don't know. I was following Ron's instructions that that's what the state requires, a vocal roll call vote.
What do you think, Peter?
I think there are certain things, Paul, more procedural votes, so adoption of the minutes, motions to continue, motions to adjourn, where you can do, assuming you can see everybody.
Well, I just ask everyone to raise their hand in the field of view, that's all.
Ask them to raise their hand. If when it comes down to substantive votes on applications, you probably still want to do a roll call, so you've got a more accurate record on those. But the procedural votes, absolutely, just great.
That's very good.
Yep.
Anything to save time helps. That's good.
It'll
Thank
save us
you.
about 20 minutes, I think.
Okay. Less than a minute to go. Do I still have to call the roll at the beginning?
You should do that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. 6 o'clock, this meeting will come to order. It's a regular meeting of the planning board. Since we are zooming, we'll start with a voice roll call. Mr. Pirrick,
Here.
Mr. Chumo,
Here.
Mrs. Owen,
Here,
Mr. Weber,
Present.
Mr. Fenton,
Here.
Mr. Nash,
Here,
and I am here. Okay, the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. We'll start with the minutes of the February 10th regular meeting. May I have a motion to approve these minutes?
so moved, Bill
so
Nash.
second,
Please identify yourself when you make the motion or second the motion. I think that was made by Bill and seconded by BJ. Is that correct?
Yeah,
correct.
Okay, is there any discussion on these minutes? Please show your hand in the field of view when you vote. All those in favor, show your hand.
aye,
Opposed?
Ooh,
Minutes are approved. And we will have the minutes of the special meeting of February 9th.
motion to approve. Bill
Second,
Nash, Bill Nash, motion to approve.
And BJ, did you second?
yes,
Motion's made and seconded to approve the minutes of the special meeting of February 9th. Is there any discussion, comments, amendments? All those in favor, show your hand.
Aye,
I vote aye also. Minutes are approved. And we have the minutes of the special meeting of February 24th.
motion to approve, Bill Nash.
second,
Motion made and seconded by Bill and BJ respectively. Is there any discussion on these minutes? All those in favor, please show your hand.
Aye,
Opposed? Any opposed? Minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is correspondence. I have 2 letters. We'll deal with them at the same time. 2 letters, both dated March 1st, from Stephen C. Ayton,
mhm,
33 Namquid Drive, Middletown, Rhode Island, regarding the regulation of marijuana-related uses. May I have a motion to receive this
so
correspondence?
moved,
second,
BJ made the motion. Bill seconded the motion. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Art,
John and I agree, I think that this letter was misdirected to the planning board. It really should be going to the council. So my
to the
recommendation,
General Assembly. It could also go to the General Assembly.
and maybe to the Congress, but at least I would recommend it be forwarded to the council for their consideration.
Ron, do you know, or Peter, do you know if the council has received this correspondence?
I don't know if they have or not.
Well, can we forward it? to
Wouldn't hurt
them?
to send it to them more than once, I suppose.
May I have a motion to receive this correspondence and forward it to the town council?
so
So
moved,
moved, John Schumo.
Motion made by John, seconded by BJ. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please show your hand.
aye,
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda are continuances. This evening, we have 3 items being continued. Items 4A, 4B, and 4C. May I have item 4A, public hearing. Application of Jack Gullison for development plan review, including requests for waivers from certain design standards of the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land, section 521, for construction of a new commercial building to include a 17-room hotel with restaurant and associated site work located on property identified as 59 Aquidneck Avenue, Assessors Plat 115 SE, Lot 169. May I have a motion to continue this item to the next regular meeting, April 14?
so moved,
BJ made the
Second.
motion. Art seconded the motion. Is there any discussion?
question,
Go ahead, Mike.
Um,
what's the reason for it being the continued this time? Is there, are they still waiting for the TRC to resolve some issues?
The TRC is waiting for the applicant to resolve some issues.
Right.
The applicant met with the TRC and some items were identified. And my understanding is that the plans are going to be revised to address at least some of the issues. We have not yet received the revised plans, but when we do get the plans, we'll have to schedule another TRC meeting and then eventually get it back to the town council.
Can I
I'm
Can I
sorry, to
ask-
the planning board.
BJ?
Yes, I have a question. Does anyone know how many times this has been continued?
Several.
Many,
Quite a few.
Yeah.
many.
And I'll just, make clear that it's at the request or a result of the applicant needing to provide revised plans. So it's entirely on the applicant.
Okay.
Paul,
Bill, yeah, go ahead.
so Ron, have we heard any testimony on this at all?
We had a site visit.
Yeah,
So-
I don't think I don't think the public hearing was ever opened.
So
No,
wouldn't it be appropriate for us to, can we take this off the agenda? I mean, we don't have, and table it until the applicant gets to the TRC?
Well, it's in process now. I'd say it's before the TRC as we speak. There was one meeting and then the item was continued to allow for revisions to the plan. So it's in process. I don't know that removing it from the agenda would be a good idea.
I thought we saw it once. I thought it was presented to us once, a long time ago. I sort of remember the hotel, with the 18 rooms and the 3 stories and all that stuff, so.
I don't remember that, honestly.
Yes.
And the retention wall, and all that business,
well, I think that was discussed at the site visit. I don't remember it being presented at a board meeting.
I can go back and look at the records, but I don't
Yeah.
recall the public hearing ever being opened. You may be recalling seeing the items in the packet.
Bill?
Paul, I'm sorry. Thank you, Paul. Ron, can you give us I know you're, I know on staff, we all want it to get through the TRC process. Realistically, can we expect to see this in the next couple of months?
It's entirely up to the applicant.
Yeah, that's that's our problem though.
Yes.
So, Paul,
John?
why are we letting the tail wag the dog on this situation? It keeps getting delayed. It basically is taking up our time.
Or
Well,
Ron's time.
I think we've spent more time discussing it tonight than we usually do, just continuing it.
But respectfully, Paul, there are agenda items that this happens with, and we have 2 more on that are very similar. So, look, it is, we have to go through the process of continuing them officially. So I'd suggest we table them until,
You know what, Mr. Chair, I would not recommend taking that action unless without giving some prior notice to the applicant and giving them an opportunity to be heard on that
Yeah.
issue.
I agree. I agree.
Ron and myself would be happy to reach out to the applicant's counsel and make him aware of the board's concern.
Why don't you
That's
reach
fine.
out to all 3 of these applicants, Peter
That's fair,
and
yeah.
Ron?
Happy to do that.
Thank you. In the
Thank you.
meantime, we
Thank you.
have a motion to continue this item. Any further discussion? Art?
Motion to continue.
Second,
Oh, no, we already have the
We already
motion made
did.
and seconded. Is
All
there
right.
any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor, please show your hands.
I,
Any opposed? This item is continued to the April 14th meeting. Item 4B, public hearing. Request of James Paradise, owner of property at 170 Aquidneck Avenue, plat 115 SE, lots 145, 146, 147, for waiver of development plan review pursuant to section 908 of the Middletown Rules and Regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land. May I have a motion to continue this item to the April 14th meeting and request the town solicitor and town planner to reach out to see if this can be tabled?
So moved.
Mr. Chair,
Art made the motion, BJ seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? All
Mr.
those in favor, please show your hand.
Paul, hang on. I think Pete wants to say something.
I just wanted to let you know that I did in fact speak with the counsel for the applicant on this one, and he indicated that there was, I don't want to get into it, but there was a reason why it was being continued now, and that would expect that this would either move forward or be withdrawn within the next month or so.
So we should just simply continue this one.
Yes.
Okay, motion is amended to simply continue this item. All those in favor, please show your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. This item is continued until the April 14th meeting. The next item is item 4C, public hearing, application of GD Middletown West Main I LLC for development plan review, including request for waiver from certain design standards of the Middletown rules and regulations regarding the subdivision and development of land, section 521, and recommendations to the zoning board of review regarding special use permit application for development in zone 1 of the watershed protection district to allow construction of a ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation on a property located at 1747 West Main Road, Plat 111, Lot 9A. May I have a motion to continue this to the April 14th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
And
Mr.
is this
Chairman, I
one that
can-
Is this one that we want to approach the applicant on?
I can update you on that. I spoke with the applicant just today, actually. He responded to an email from me and indicated that he continues to work to revise the plans to address some issues regarding easements and also to address concerns and questions raised by the town engineer on the design of the solar field. Those revised plans will allow for the TRC to complete its review, but he's aware that that the board is anxious to get this moving.
So we should simply continue this at this point.
I think so.
Is there any discussion on this motion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
So yeah, thank you. And I respectfully to the applicants, and I know they're trying and I want to give them all the consideration, but I think we all deserve some consideration also. So I'm okay. I'll support the motion to continue, but I'll go on record now to say that for all of the 3 items that we've discussed, I'm prepared next month to make a motion to continue it for at least 2 months rather than 1 month, if it's going to help them move the process along. But no sense in doing it. I'll make them. I would support a motion next month to continue these applications for 2 months rather than 1 month.
All right, and perhaps Peter and or Ron can notify the applicants of that intent.
Certainly.
Sure.
All right, is any further discussion on this motion? All those in favor, please show your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is continued to the April 14th meeting. The next item on the agenda are items 4D and 4E. And my understanding is that these are going to be withdrawn. Is there anyone here to speak for them, Ron?
I don't think so. I did receive correspondence from Mr. Gallipo via email requesting that the planning board approve the withdrawal of these items without prejudice.
May I have a motion to withdraw these 2 items without prejudice?
So moved.
BJ moved,
Second.
Art seconds the motion. Is there any discussion?
Yep.
Bill?
Just the amount of work that the staff has put in, and Peter, is you all okay with this? I mean, we expect this will probably come back at some point, but are you okay without prejudice? And
Yes.
yep, I support that as well.
Any other discussion on this item? Okay, the motion is to, no, I need a motion. May I have a motion to withdraw items 4D and 4E?
So moved. Bill Nash.
Bill made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
BJ second the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please show your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, let me get my papers in order here. Hold on a second. Okay, the
Well,
next,
if you had Paul, if you had the digital version, you wouldn't have to get any papers in order.
Actually, I do have the digital version, but I only have one small screen, so it's much easier for me to
Yes.
manage this with
I understand.
paper.
I understand. Thank you
Sorry
for
to hold
running.
you up. Next item on the agenda is item 5A, new business. Review and provide recommendations to the town council on proposed amendments to section 400 definitions,
Mhm.
section 602 schedule of district regulations, section 703 accessory uses and structures, and section 725 of the Middletown zoning ordinance regarding ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations, including design requirements for all arrays and specific provisions for arrays mounted on carports and canopies.
Mhm.
Ron, do you want to give a brief intro?
Sure. So since the last time we discussed this matter, the draft has been revised per the planning board's discussion. Made some modifications to clarify the fact that solar carports and canopies are in fact part of and under the definition of ground-mounted solar energy system. That was one of the concerns and questions that was raised at the public workshop.
Yes.
So I made some changes to clarify that. We also had some discussion about setbacks and a couple of items related to setbacks. One being the prohibition of ground-mounted solar arrays within front yards. And then also a discussion of side and well, at least side yard setbacks, where there was need for some clarification. So I've made some changes to that section as well in the dimensional table. In the draft that you got, the draft dated February 11th, you'll also notice that under section 703 accessory uses and structures, you'll see a bunch of red at the end of that section with additions. All that is adding in to 705 for the purpose of the ordinance and what the town council will receive the full section 705. What you saw previously in the draft did not include sections E, F, and G, even though they exist in 705. So that's just a matter of making sure the council, when they receives this, has the complete section 705 before them.
That
Or
answers one of my questions.
703, I'm sorry, it's section 703. Yeah, I thought that might be a bit confusing. So that's why that was added in, just for the council's benefit. And I think, I don't know if there were any other significant changes, so, a couple of typos that I fixed. I think it was really those two more substantial issues, which were clarifying where carports sit in terms of being under the definition of ground mounted, and then the discussion of the setbacks. And the board may wish to talk a little bit about, at least with the setback in the dimensional tables, whether the board is comfortable with the changes that have been made. Rita, but Rita had a question inserted here, maybe not. I had a note that just pointing out for the board's benefit that for solar carports or canopies, I indicated that they would rely on the principal building setbacks in 603, because if you were to use the accessory structures, that was a very small setback. So it's a much larger, more, I think, appropriate setback.
It's like
And-
10, right, Ron?
in
Something like
principle.
that.
Yeah.
All right, before I ask for a motion, is there any discussion on the draft that Ron provided? BJ and then Joe.
Yes, first of all, forwarding it to the town council, I assume that the photos that we saw that we liked are going to be included. That's number one. Number two, I found it very interesting, the explanation about the tents, because that was the first time I thought that was mentioned. tent erected and maintained for not more than 30 days or up to 9 months under successive licenses. Now, would these be tents for selling things or what?
So again, BJ, that's in the current ordinance. That's not anything that's being proposed by the
Oh,
planning
okay.
board.
Okay, that's
Hasn't
what I was
changed.
wondering, why it was in there. And the other comment I wanted to make, I was really thrilled with the landscaping and vegetation, of course. And I thought that the explanation of the soil preservation, I don't know how many people are aware of it, that you cannot dig up something and just toss away the soil. It has to be maintained on the property. That is something that all of the parks have to do, that DEM requires. And I was just wondering whether or not that was clear.
It's certainly something that I think we would want to encourage in this, particularly in a situation where you've got agricultural lands that might be used perhaps only temporarily for the use of a solar field, and then might have the ability to revert back to agricultural use. You don't want to lose that topsoil, so having it maintained on site is important.
Yes, thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, hi. My question's directed to Ron. Ron, will this new text have any material effect on that solar application that's going to be coming in front of us from GD Middletown on West Main?
It will not, because he has a complete application
Okay.
and he's proceeding under the current ordinance.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
All right.
Other comments from the planning board? Art?
I think I've asked Ron this again. If I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. In my walking around the neighborhoods, which I've got plenty of time to do, there's a ground-mounted solar array in Slate Hill Farm. I don't know what process it went through, but I also understand from my neighbors that they needed relief for the setback of the unit. So I wonder under what provisions and instructions and guidance was that allowed to be built? And did the zoning board participate in that particular exercise?
I don't have any knowledge of what permits were received or whether the zoning board saw it. Obviously, the planning board didn't see it. I think under current ordinance, those types of installations have been viewed as accessory uses.
Yeah.
So if they went to, Peter might remember if this came before the
I
board.
do recall, probably sometime over the last 6 months, a residential ground-mounted solar, small scale, coming in front of the zoning board. I don't know whether it was in that particular neighborhood or not. Could have been, but certainly one came in with regard to the location in the rear yard and setbacks, et cetera.
Excuse me.
I'm curious how they can build something where we don't have an existing ordinance. What is the zoning office and the zoning board going by in terms of guidance?
In that case, I believe they took the position that a small residential solar facility was a permitted accessory use.
Yeah.
The same way as a roof-mounted one would have been.
Yeah, I think absence of any kind of good regulation like we have in front of us, that's the way you kind of have to interpret it that way.
But
And
certainly there's very clear
All right.
guidance now, assuming that this is adopted, so.
All right.
Other comments? Ron, I have a question.
Mhm.
If in the first paragraph following 725.4 abandonment, am I reading this correctly that carports and canopies installations are exempted from dismantling within 90 days if they're abandoned?
That's the way it's drafted, and the thinking behind that was that it's possible that the property owner could argue that even though the solar might be disassembled or not might not be generating power anymore, that the carports could remain and still serve a purpose for covering the parking area, protecting the cars. So that's the thinking behind that. If the board would prefer not to allow that, then.
Are you saying that they could not dismantle their solar installation and retain the carport anyway?
They could, under the way this is drafted, the carport could remain.
Well,
Would not-
but the solar installation would remain also the way this is written.
Yeah, right. They could cease operation of the solar panels, but the panels could remain, correct?
Well, how does the board feel about that? Bill?
So the question of abandonment is tricky, Peter. I know Peter can explain, but yeah, that now that I read it that way, that raises a little bit of a red flag for me. But Peter, the abandonment thing, is that something that we need to consider here?
From my perspective, if they're not required to abandon these, to remove the solar installation, it could stay there forever.
Well, it goes with the use though, right? Because you can't have an accessory use without a principal use.
Yeah, so this is, once again, the idea here is that if these things aren't going to be, if they're no longer used, if they no longer work, is not to have them simply, remain on the property, like we don't allow derelict unregistered vehicles to remain on the property.
That makes sense.
The idea is to be able to require these things to be
So
removed.
shouldn't we require that the solar equipment be removed if the installation is abandoned?
But Paul, here's my thing with the abandonment. You may disconnect them and not be connected to the grid or not collecting the system, but it doesn't mean that can't reconnect it someday.
Well, I understand that, Bill, but nevertheless, it allows someone to just disconnect and leave it there.
That's what happens with abandonment of property many times, and we don't have much.
So my
much
question
control
is
over
that what we want to do?
And again, the issue here is the carport. So if the solar use is discontinued, do they also have to take down the carport?
Well, no, I'm assuming, and maybe it's a wrong assumption, that they can remove the solar equipment, but retain the carport.
I wouldn't make that assumption.
Yeah.
Be all in.
And I think, these things don't really look like regular carports. So you don't want, for consistency's sake.
Well, I'd like to get a sense of the board on how you feel on this issue.
Well, how do you know if it's working or not? Maybe the guy abandons it and he's not going to run down the street and tell everybody, hey, I don't have solar anymore.
How does the town know, by the way? How does the town know that it's
Probably
abandoned?
won't.
Yeah.
Probably won't, Paul. Yeah. I don't know if there's much we can do about it.
John?
And Bill might know the answer to this, maybe, Ron. Can you give me the definition of abandoned property? Is there a time limit on it before
The
you
intent
declare?
to abandon that the problem is. There's no intent to abandon this.
In the draft, it's 90 days. So for a ground mounted solar array, and not carports as currently drafted, any ground mounted solar array would have to be removed if it's not generating power for 90 days. So if you wanted to apply to the carports as well, and as I think someone just suggested, the carports that are put up to support the solar are substantial structures, and maybe the board would prefer that those go away as well once the solar ends.
John?
You know what, Mr. Chairman, I think Bill, his questions probably revolve around the use of the term abandonment,
Yes.
which is a sort of a term of art in different sort of zoning respects in terms of non-conforming uses and whether they've been abandoned and is there an intent to abandon. And I apologize for not picking up on that earlier. It may make more sense to revise this provision to simply say that these facilities are allowed to remain on the permitted property, as long as they are continuing to generate power And if at some point down the road they cease to generate power, that they are required to be removed, either to be repaired, replaced or removed within 90 days.
Yeah, the term abandonment,
I could, yeah, and just not use the term abandonment because that may.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Peter.
So why don't I do a redraft of that I can send to Ron and Rita. And then, I don't know if you want to otherwise take action on it today.
They could send it forward with a recommendation subject to that revision.
Hold
okay
on a
with that.
second. Joe, did you have a comment?
Well, I personally think that carports and canopy installations, if something's discontinued and it's integrated with solar, it should be taken down. So I don't want there to be any, I'd like to see everything lumped together.
Yeah. John, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I've seen carports that have built years ago that are attached to the house. You just drive the car into the carport instead of a garage. So does that mean the person has to literally take apart what essentially is kind of part of his house? Because it's built out from one side of the house. That's a carport that I remember.
If it's solar.
Drive a car under it, but it's attached to the house.
definition,
To the house, it really probably wouldn't qualify as a ground mounted solar. It would really
exactly.
be more of a roof mounted if it's actually part of an addition to the building itself.
Right, right.
Yeah,
So
okay.
this is really meant to deal with, if you think of the photographs that Ron and Rita provided of these, things that just get wheeled into your driveway.
Standalone.
And
Right.
John, that's a great point. That might be, you're talking about, thinking things from like now moving forward, these new integrated solar carports and things, canopies. Somebody might have something that's grandfathered in that's, from 15, 20 years ago.
Sure.
So I'm thinking kind of all the new stuff going forward.
Okay, yeah, certainly I agree with that.
Yeah, and one of the photos that we saw was one of a large canopy
Yep.
that could be used as a canopy, but it's big and, I hear you, Joe, if it's not being used as a solar collector, then, there's no need for it there because, it's not serving the purpose intended. So I think some rewriting is in order. Maybe we should bring it back so that we can see it again and kind of go through that discussion again.
Well, I'd like to see it again too, but I'm wondering if we can circulate it by email. Is that feasible or is that not allowed?
If the board,
I can provide it to Ron and he can send it out to everybody by email so that you can, but yeah, if you want to review it again, then I would just recommend it come back at the next meeting for a final review. But certainly-
Why don't we do that? Art,
I'll make a motion to continue that till next month.
yeah.
Second,
Motion's made by Art, seconded by Bill to continue this item to the next meeting, April 14th, to allow Peter to rewrite that section. Any further discussion?
mm-mm.
Is there anything else, Paul, that you had questions? I think.
That was my last question.
Yeah.
Any other comments? All those in favor, please show your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? This item is continued to the April 14th meeting. The next item on the agenda is item 5B, review and provide recommendation to the town council on implementation of build-out study recommendations. Ron, would you like to introduce this, please?
sure, and I think I'd like to turn it over to, I think Joe was the chairman of this subcommittee. But the subcommittee met a few times with.
Ron, excuse me, let me ask Joe if he would like to present. this.
No. I think, Ron, you made these great edits based on the last meeting / discussion we had. And
It was actually Rita because I missed the last meeting. So Rita did
I'm
the
sorry, Rita.
latest
but,
drafting.
no, I think it captures the intent. Less is more, but it's right on.
What we did do after that last meeting was reach out to Public Works and the town engineer, since they were going to be tasked and will be tasked with at least contributing to a lot of this work, to get some feedback from them on the reasonability of the of the time frame. So you'll see that the time frames have been, I think, bumped out from where they were when the committee last talked about this. Rita, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So at our last subcommittee meeting, there was a desire to make clear, attainable timeframes. So that's what was added into the draft. And the other major edit that we did was to put the stormwater utility back up onto number 2, and then provide the timeframes. And then I believe all the other edits were just sort of minor housekeeping edits. And the timeframes, I actually originally just took a stab at the timeframes, and then we consulted with the other departments to get a better time scale, and they recommended slightly longer timeframes. So that's what's in there now with town engineer and the DPW looked at those.
Okay, any comments from the board?
Yeah.
Art, then BJ, then Bill.
Well, I noticed there's a major objective of mine that is complemented in this program to go forward, and it's the wastewater management plan. And I would think there would be quite a bit of input from Public Works on that particular issue, because you've got to come up with an inspection system and a method of establishing the inspections, and then a mechanism for those who don't want to participate in Superior Court, et cetera. So I think that's a great objective, but I just wonder what the take was from the staff on that one.
I don't know that that would be a Public Works.
It might be. Yeah.
It might be, and that may be where it ends up going, but it's certainly engineering is going to be involved, and other town staff. Since we're talking about individual septic systems, it's not typically something Public Works would get involved with.
Okay. I do know that our cousins to the north have established another person in the planning department that runs the entire thing, the inspections and all that stuff. So.
Right. Yeah, I think it's probably self-funding or pretty close to being self-funding through the fees.
BJ.
I
then
mean,
Bill.
Art, your point.
Joe, BJ, then Bill, then Joe.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ron, for your explanation, because that was my major thing to ask about the engineering department, and whether or not, as Art just said, the Public Works Department had a review and what their comment was on it, because a lot rests on their shoulders.
Yeah, well,
And I found it very interesting.
they both, Public Works and the town engineer, were asked to review not just the timeframes, but all the tasks as well. And they didn't indicate any major concerns. And again, it was mainly the timeframes that they had some reservations about.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Bill and then Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I just wanted to clarify, Rita, you had a question on page 2 relative to prioritize for flood-prone areas.
Yeah, and I was not at all of the subcommittee meetings where this was drafted with Steve Cabral's help. So I wanted to just bring that back up again, because I wasn't sure what the intent of that line was supposed to be. That was on page 2, number 7.
Number 7.
I don't know, maybe Joe or somebody can, or Ron can plug in what that issue was.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure myself. I don't know if it was to do with trying to address development in floodplains, perhaps, to try to, whether it's limit development or address existing development through mitigation.
Is it the term that you question, or just the concept?
I just didn't know what was being prioritized.
We don't really know what it is. We can reach
Nice.
out to Steve Cabral again and ask him what his thought was behind that one.
I think, we were looking at certain areas, certainly like Berkeley Avenue, that tend to get flooded, in certain storms. But, in certain areas in the town where after big, storms, we do have, a it takes a while before a lot of the floodwaters kind of, shed off. I think they're pretty well known, I think, to the town engineer. And I think those are the things we were talking about prioritizing.
Well, then that kind of fits with what I was thinking. I mean, maybe it's just a matter of adding that phrase to the end, call it prioritize flood prone areas for mitigation actions.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Joe, you had a comment?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that's exactly what, Mike, you hit the nail on the head. We were talking about Berkeley, we were talking about like the southern end of Paradise before you get to Surfer's End, floods out all the time. So certain areas like that, just it's under long-term consideration. So looking at these areas and trying to develop plans and best practices where we could try to address, these ongoing problems that we have that contribute to, stormwater and pollution in our, estuaries and beach areas.
Ron, you suggested adding some wording. Could you repeat that?
So I would reword it to say prioritize flood prone areas for mitigation actions or
Is that
something.
okay with everyone?
Good,
Yeah,
yes.
Paul,
Bill?
just to follow up on, I agree with everything up to that point. That makes more sense to me. I just wanted to follow on the Rita's question relative to the last 3 words there, additional subdivision regulations. Was that to maybe go back to subdivision regulations to try to pull something out of there?
That was just a question, as I didn't know what the item was being prioritized for. What
Okay.
were we going to be looking at?
Yep, I got
But
you.
if we're just going to talk generally about mitigation actions, that
makes
is a
sense,
large
yes.
umbrella.
Okay, so if we add the words that Ron suggested to that item 7, is that okay with everyone?
Ron, could you repeat what you were going to add, please?
For
So
me,
number
Yeah.
7 would say prioritize flood prone areas for mitigation actions.
Thank you.
Okay with everyone?
does that still define it enough for people? I mean, do they really want, do we want to put in any list of items or any list of flood prone areas that we think might be,
I think
Well,
it's pretty well known.
I think that would be the task under that item, is to identify those areas and suggest recommended mitigation actions.
Why
You
don't
could
we
put
add-
identify and
Yeah,
prioritize.
identify and
Right, there you go.
prioritize.
All right.
Thank you.
Hold on, BJ.
Yes, I found it very interesting about toward the end about publicity, developing educational campaign to promote well testing. And I recommend and thought maybe this was a place to mention the Middletown newsletter, because this is getting to most all the residents in town. And this would be a great thing to use for reaching people about promoting their well testing, voluntary program to report to the town, things like that. That's just a recommendation. I don't know if it should be included or not.
I think it's certainly a vehicle. I don't know if we have to identify specific actions at this point, but it's
Mhm.
certainly a good vehicle for doing that.
Mhm.
Other comments? So if Ron makes that addition to that line 7, are we all okay with forwarding this to the town council?
Yes,
yes.
Ron, do you still have the draft of the cover memo that I sent you?
I do.
So may I have a motion to forward these prioritized recommendations to the town council?
so moved.
BJ
Second,
made the motion. John Chumo seconded the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please show your hands. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is item 5C. Review a draft of 5-year status report on the comprehensive plan implementation for submission to the Rhode Island Division of Planning. Ron, you want to introduce this topic?
Sure. So under the current comprehensive planning statute, the town is required to Well, most importantly, we're required to have an adopted comprehensive plan that is reviewed and approved by the state, which we do have. That plan needs to be updated or readopted every 10 years. And also under the statute, you're required to, the town is required to submit a report to statewide planning at the 5-year point to report on implementation of the plan. Our plan was adopted it was adopted by the town in early 2015. It was approved by the state in late 2015. So we're just beyond the 5 years. Rita did some work, attended a workshop session with statewide planning on what they like to see in these 5-year reports. And there were some examples that they posted. And we selected, I think, a format that is going to meet the requirements. It's going to satisfy what statewide planning is looking for, but without getting into a whole lot of detail on each individual action item, which is a direction that I had considered going in earlier on, which would be an extensive amount of work to report on each and every action item. Some towns, I think it might have been Warwick, went in that direction, and then others, as I said, have done more of a summary highlights, I guess, report of how the plan is being implemented. They asked that we identify some accomplishments that have occurred and also some impediments that the town has experienced in implementing some of the action items. So that's the draft that you have in front of you, is again taking that approach, the more summarized approach, and Rita put this draft together, and we're, I think, at a point where we'll probably just do a proofread of it, but it's probably in about as final form as it needs to be, and get sent up to the state to get us in compliance with that reporting requirement.
Comments from the planning board? BJ?
I think it looks good, and I think it's very, very well put together for the accomplishments and the impediments and the different areas that she's covered. I think it's very well done.
Other comments? Michael?
So I see the acronym CDBG there. I mean, should we spell that out? I mean, I don't know what that is, but does it get defined someplace?
No, yeah, we can definitely do that. Of course, everybody at the state would know what it is, but I think if the public's going to get as much benefit out of this as possible, we need to spell out those acronyms. So we can, I don't know if there may be others in here too that we can go through and spell them all out.
GIS.
Yeah. CIP, I just saw that one.
Yeah, those are good ones. That's a good point, Mike.
So
Other
also,
comments?
Under transportation circulation, you mentioned a complete streets initiative began in 2016. I'm not sure what that is. I don't think I've ever seen it.
That was
impediments.
Yeah, that was a policy that was brought forward. I think it was AARP that started that conversation. They did a sort of a statewide outreach to towns, trying to get them to adopt resolutions to promote development of complete streets. And that's basically whenever a town is building, or a developer for that matter, is building a new street or is making significant improvements or upgrades to existing streets, that efforts be made to incorporate alternative transportation options. And really what that means is providing sidewalks, providing bike lanes when possible. Those are the two big ones that we often see when you're talking about complete streets. So that policy or resolution, I'm not sure exactly how the council adopted it, but it was adopted by the town council back, I guess it was in 2016. And it's on the books. And I guess the impediment is that there hasn't been a lot of street construction, street upgrades where we've had the opportunity to take that step to implement a complete streets approach. again, where we might be reconstructing a road to provide for
All right.
bike lanes or sidewalks where they don't exist.
Sorry, Ron. Art?
Well, I think the Complete Streets is really promoting a connectivity of streets for a variety of reasons, for safety vehicles and so on. If you go up to Portsmouth, you've got about 2 billion cul-de-sacs. So I think that's one of the other efforts for the Complete Streets is to connect them in a more useful fashion than existing. It's not much of a problem, I don't think, here in Middletown, but it can be.
One thing that is happening, and it's not a town project, is that Aquidneck Avenue, the upper Aquidneck reconstruction that the state is going to be doing. I guess you could say it's at the town's insistence that project happen, and it will provide for construction of a sidewalk along Aquidneck Avenue between East Main Road and Green End. So that is some progress, and maybe we can add that to the report just to indicate that when opportunities like that do arise, the town has been active and trying to promote those projects. It's just that there's not a whole lot of reconstruction of town roads going on.
Other comments, Bill?
Paul, thank you. Ron, did you, I'm looking at the housing section relative to inclusionary zoning. Is that something that you
Mhm.
wanted to bring up at this point?
Yeah, so I provided a separate
Hold on,
memo.
Ron. We're not done with this yet.
Well, it's under the same
That's
agenda.
what I was
item.
asking.
I know that, but it's separate, and I want to finish what's written in this document
Okay.
first, because I have questions on this. Any other questions from the planning board members?
Are there any-
Ron, I have two questions, Ron. Under transportation circulation, in the second paragraph, you talk about a proposed roundabout received negative feedback. There were two roundabouts proposed, and one of them I know received negative feedback, but the other one I thought was going forward. Is that still correct?
Yeah, that we can clarify that. The roundabout, there was a roundabout proposed at Aquidneck and Purgatory that was nixed. And
Yes.
as you know, the intersection has since been revised and improved
Yes.
without the roundabout. But
Yes.
there is still a roundabout being proposed for Aquidneck and Valley.
Okay, could we clarify that so that
sure.
the other one doesn't get nixed?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And my other question is under water supply, the very last sentence where it says drinking water quality remains a concern. I assume you're talking about well water, drinking water quality. Is that correct?
Yes, so we can clarify that as well.
Yes, okay, thank you. Any other comments on the document that Ron presented? Michael?
Well, the town water is also a concern because of the sources of pollution in the watershed areas too, isn't it?
Well, I guess the question I had was, what did that sentence refer to?
Okay.
And I assume it was referring to well water.
I think well water is where we know, due to testing that was done, that there have been issues with nitrogen in the water in some wells on the east side of town. So I assume that that's what that's talking about. But to Mike's point, there is also a desire to maintain or probably improve the quality of source water. So the runoff that's getting into Bailey Brook and Matrig River, we would certainly want that to be as clean as possible, and improving the quality of that water reduces the need for treatment at the other end. So I guess both things can be referenced in that section. We can add a bit of a discussion of both.
Okay, very good. Any other comments on the implementation report itself? Okay, as was noted, this other document that Ron sent out is also to be discussed under this section. This has to do with housing. Ron, you want to introduce this?
So as we were looking at this report, the 5-year report, having to report on what progress the town has made, and then also coincidentally, there's increasing interest on the part of the town council and others in town in relation to providing affordable housing, starting with the senior housing project that's being discussed. And that's expanded, the discussion has expanded somewhat as that conversation has proceeded, to also looking at additional options for affordable housing, family housing, workforce housing, that sort of thing. So the conversation seems to be coming to a head at this point. So I wanted to take a little bit of time and look back at the comprehensive plan and the action items that we have in the comprehensive plan to address affordable housing, and just provide you with a report on my take on where we are with all of those items. So that's the reason I put this memo together, for really all of us, to remind all of us where what we have in the comp plan, where we are with those action items, and to use this memo perhaps as a starting point to identify items that we want to pick up and start working on, or I guess revisit, because there are a couple that I think that we've started working on and they got pushed aside. So I think that's really, again, the purpose of the memo is to start the conversation and see if the planning board is interested in proceeding with picking up some of these action items and doing some work on them.
Well, the one that I know they got pushed aside was the item on inclusionary housing.
Right.
We did give that to a subcommittee, and the subcommittee found that, it was just unworkable because of, if I recall correctly, because of density problems.
There was concern, right? So what, under the statute, under the state law, well, let me start, I guess, for those who may not be familiar with what an inclusionary housing is, what that would be, it would be an ordinance that would require under, usually it's under larger development scenarios, major subdivisions or major land development projects, that a certain percentage of those new units would be required to meet the town's affordable housing requirement, or contribute to the town's affordable housing inventory. We don't currently have that requirement in town. It does exist in other communities. The typical, I don't know if it's typical, but one example would be requiring any major subdivision to have 10% of its units meet that affordable housing standard, or any apartment complex, apartment building being proposed 10% or more. Sometimes it's 15% or even more of the units being required to meet that affordable housing standard. So that's what inclusionary housing is. And of course, the intent and the goal is to have those units created to offset or to provide units towards the town's affordable housing inventory. Again, trying to meet that goal that the state has in the statute of 10% of the units in town being affordable. So the discussion that happened back, Paul, you were just talking about with the subcommittee, in the statute, there's also a requirement that if you're going to require through inclusionary zoning that affordable housing be built, you have to provide some bonus to the developer to offset the impact on the developer. And that's typically done through a density bonus, essentially allowing the applicant, the developer, to build more units than he would otherwise be allowed to build in exchange for providing the affordable units. And the conversation was that there was concern that increasing density for the purpose of affordable housing was not a direction that, at least at that point in time, that the subcommittee wanted to go. And so the conversation pretty much ended at that point.
Could I make a suggestion? Since this was sent to us rather late, and there's quite a bit of substance in this document, could I suggest that I ask Ron to perhaps propose an action plan? Maybe select a few items that should be acted on and prioritize them for us and present it at the next meeting. And we could have a discussion on how to proceed at that point.
Mhm.
Does that sound okay with everyone?
Yes.
Everyone all right with that? BJ?
Yes, I just like to say that this comes up periodically. It really does, this 10%. And it's because of our legislature. And I know Senator Lou Reptakis very well, and he has been trying for years to get this reduced, or at least to have mobile homes included in this project of 10%. And that certainly would be very helpful here in Middletown. I don't know if perhaps an encouragement with our representatives might help to handle this 10%, particularly for the mobile homes. I don't know how people feel about it.
Art?
Well, I want to say a couple of things. Number one, I think right now the council's on the wrong track on affordable housing. We should not focus on, in my opinion, on senior affordable housing. We need to focus on all three levels: economically eligible, workforce, and senior. And I see that as a problem because very soon we may have a new project come to fruition on West Main Road that's going to have affordable housing as a possibility in mixed use. So who's going to get it? Number one. Number two, we have been talking for years about legislators helping us do something and nothing's happened. Trailers are a perfect example. Oxbow came off the rolls when the mortgage was paid, so it's an administrative situation that took them off the affordable housing list. And that should be addressed also. So I was on the committee looking at this situation, and the only way to really get around it is just what Ron discussed, the town doesn't want. You could go out to the east side and find some open property, R30, R40, and build something maybe like Whitehall. And you could do affordable housing. Well, that's going to go over just about as much as water coming over to the east side. So that's the problem we ran into, is where do you put affordable housing in town? There's no place really on the west side. So it's going to have to go in someplace like that. And that's where the conundrum comes up with, gee, we can't do it. And nothing happens to the town if we're not at 10%. There's no punishment.
True.
So it's like a goal in the sky. And if you make it, that's great. If not, have a nice day. You know?
The only recourse, so just to clarify, the only recourse regarding the 10%, if the town does not have, has not met the 10% requirement, developers are allowed then to submit a comprehensive, it's called a comprehensive permit application, which would allow a developer, if the project has a minimum of 25% affordable units, to request substantial relief from the town zoning regulations. And then that application is considered by the planning board as the board that would make all decisions. They would not have to go to the zoning
Thank you,
board.
John.
So there is a, you know, it's not a big stick that the town is subject to for not meeting the 10%, but there is something that the developers have that they're able to use in towns that do not meet the 10% to allow them to request relief from certain zoning provisions.
John?
Question, Ron. Do you know of communities in Rhode Island that do this? Developers come in and put in X amount of homes, and X amount of homes are for, you know, lower priced. And you know any other companies that do this?
There are towns that have implemented inclusionary zoning. Yes, I don't have them off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that for you.
No, I just was wondering. I don't know of any.
Yep, there are.
So it's workable.
Right.
So it's
Oh, yeah.
Each community will have varying.
Yeah,
opinion.
again, the hurdle we ran into was the acceptability of having that density bonus.
Okay, thank you.
For what it's worth, I lived in Newton outside of Boston for a long time, and they do it almost routinely. Any development that goes in includes 10% affordable housing.
Thank you, Paul.
Newton, big time. Whoa.
But that's Massachusetts. That's not Rhode Island. So any other, is everyone okay with Ron coming back with a proposal for the planning board to address? Are you okay with that, Ron?
That's fine. Sure, I can take this this list and sort of whittle it down to the items that seem like they're workable and things that the planning board, not everything on the list is something that the planning board would necessarily do anyway, but for those items that seem like they're planning board items and things that we can work on, I'll cobble that together.
Great, thank you. All right, so we will at least move that item to the next meeting, and let's go back to the 5-year implementation report. May I have a motion to forward that to It's the state planning department, state,
Yeah,
moved.
statewide planning.
So moved.
statewide planning. John Chumo moved it. BJ seconded the motion. Any further discussion?
Does it include the items we discussed? You know, the-
Yes, as amended, as discussed, Ron. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Right.
Yes. Further discussion? All those in favor, please show your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is item 5D. Review and provide a recommendation to the town council on a proposed amendment to the Middletown zoning ordinance, section 704E, height and yard modifications regarding height limit in flood zones. Introduction, Ron?
So we currently are before the town council. Second reading is coming up on Monday night on the changes that have been made are proposed to be made to the definition in the zoning ordinance on building height. And that is a result of changes that were made to the definition in the state statute. So we're basically bringing our zoning ordinance into compliance with the state statute. That definition change, and you may recall this, although it's been a little while since you last saw it, requires that calculations, in making a calculation for building height, you have to look at both the FEMA flood insurance rate map and the building or the base flood elevations of that map. And you also now have to look at the Coastal Resource Management Council's inundation maps based on a 100-year storm and 3 feet of sea level rise. And using both of those maps, you basically have to calculate worst case scenario, and then that difference in elevation between the flood and ground level gets subtracted out when you're measuring the building height. So this is something that the building official has to deal with and is already dealing with because it's in the statute. So even though our zoning ordinance hasn't yet been adopted, they're required to comply with the state statute. So anyway, long story short, all of those changes are before the town council now. But as we were looking at this, and Peter picked up on it, we had previously submitted amendments to the town council that were adopted to reduce the maximum building height on properties and for buildings within the FEMA designated floodplain by 8 feet. You may remember that, and that was a reaction to this change in the statute,
Yeah.
where we were concerned with those changes, you would end up with very tall buildings because you would be basically allowing for the difference between the ground elevation and the flood elevation to be added to the top of the building, putting it kind of simply. To try to address that and to try to reduce the impact of that change in the statute, we instituted this section E under 704, or modified it to reduce the building height by 8 feet in flood zones. The problem, of course, is now that the latest definition change in the statute also incorporates the CRMC maps. We now have to change that section again
Again.
to also incorporate the CRMC maps, because if we didn't do that, someone would who might not be in the FEMA flood zone but would be in the CRMC inundation area would not be subject to that reduction, that 8-foot height reduction. So Peter picked up on that, and that's simply what this amendment would do.
Comments, Art?
Well, I'll tell you right now, I think it's totally unfair. If you happen to be in a FEMA place or CRMC, you've got a new penalty. Your house can be 8 foot shorter than if you were in a normal place. And I find that I don't know, Peter, that's almost like a taking.
Well,
I get why it's yeah.
Well, first of all, just to back up, just to follow up on what Ron is saying, the planning board already, and I know Ron was maybe a year ago, 2 years ago.
It was more than
They were
that.
changing the definition every year for a time there. So
Yeah.
But a couple of years back, the board recommended this change to the town council, at least as it related to properties in the FEMA flood zone, because the concern was you would have properties that might be 8, 10 feet taller, basically down on the waterfront, basically blocking the view of the water in those areas of town. And so if to be consistent, now that, you know, you can elevate the height if based on the FEMA maps or now the CRMC maps, in order to maintain the intent of what the board previously recommended and the council previously adopted, we're just adding the CRMC maps to that provision.
Right.
So this is just maintaining consistency with what the board had previously recommended the last time that we looked at building height.
So honey, we shrunk the house. Is that the deal here?
Well, the reality is that you won't be-
Basically, it would maintain the you know, the peak elevation of these properties would for the most part remain consistent with the properties that are outside of the flood zone. But yes, it might squeeze the overall height of the property from the base to the peak.
Yeah, so,
Bill?
yeah, if it's 35 feet, and that's generally the area that we're looking at, where we're at, you're gonna be 8 feet short. You're gonna have a 28-foot house or a 27-foot house. That's the reality of being in a flood zone or the CRMC area. That's,
As a practical matter, what it probably does is it eliminates 3-story houses in the flood zone.
exactly, that's about right.
If you're over 6 feet, you have to stay on the first floor.
Michael?
Does this apply to commercial properties too, or like hotels and stuff like that?
Apply to any properties in the flood zone.
Flood zone.
I often wondered about building height. You know, I look at the town, and there's some areas, you know, very prominent areas you sort of pass by, and you know, and architecturally, you know, I see some buildings there and things like that, and I think that maybe if they had, you know, if they could have been built a little bit bigger, they, you know, they would look a lot better. You know, for instance, I look at that hotel there, you know, where the Seacrest Motel used to be. You know, it's got a very flat roof. You know, and to me, I don't understand why that thing was limited to being, you know, so low. I think architecturally that thing could have looked a lot better if we, you know, if they had the option of going higher.
Agreed.
So why is it? It seems to me like limiting, you know, this height limitation kind of is very restrictive, you know, and might not necessarily give us the what we want in the end, you know, in some cases, you know.
This would only apply to those properties in the flood zone. So for example, that property that you're referring to would not be affected by this because that's, you know, elevated out of the flood zone.
Two separate things, but a good concept. I think it's a good idea, Mike. I like that direction.
Yeah.
Well, that's not before us this evening, so let's not
Right.
get into that. Other comments on this document and what it's proposing? May I have a motion to send a positive recommendation to the town council?
So moved, Bill Nash.
Art Weber, second.
Motion made by Bill, seconded by Art. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please show your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the status report on planning board action items. Are there any comments on this? Before anybody comments, I want to point out that this list tracks items that the planning board has worked on, and it tracks them through final action, not just planning board activity. And we did this because a lot of things were being sent up to the town council and got lost there, or seemingly got lost there. So we wanted to keep track of all the things that we had worked on that had not yet had final action taken. That's why we initiated this report. Okay, any comments on this month's report? Art?
Well, I'm going to make the same complaint I've made. I don't know why. When you look at the first issue. This issue was received last year on July 6 by the town council in 2020. It's now accelerating ourselves into the spring, almost a year later. And I find that unacceptable. I mean, we did the work, it's there, get it in front of those people and let's get it implemented and done. I say that all the time. I'm not mad at anybody. I just get frustrated that we don't get stuff into them and their action taken on it in a more expeditious fashion.
Peter,
Yeah, just on this, on that particular item, I expect that is going to be coming before the council soon. And one thing and Art's comments are well taken. I think part of the issue was, back when everything went virtual and remote, and this time last year, we were all assuming that it would be, a couple of months and things would be back to normal. I know that the council was somewhat hesitant to have some items where there was great public interest heard remotely because of a concern that it might somehow suppress public input. And that was, back at the beginning of the process of learning how to handle these meetings and how to actually get public input through the Zoom process. So I think back then we were all hoping that we'll just wait a little bit and things will be back to normal and everyone will be back in town hall and we'll get these things done. That obviously didn't happen. And so now, with more experience, these things are going to come back to the council and get heard. So I expect that one is going to be on one of the upcoming dockets fairly shortly.
thank you. Any other comments on the project status report? Okay, next item on the agenda is the Brack Navy land. Any updates, Ron?
Nothing really new on that, no.
Nothing new? Committee reports, use table, still waiting for in-person
Waiting.
meetings, right?
Gonna happen soon.
Going to happen soon, yeah. Marijuana, John?
There's been a slight revision made on page 5 regarding that Lori brought up and Peter affirmed that there has to be 1,000-foot buffer between any pre-existing schools, public or private, for cultivators.
And so that's been forwarded to
And
the
Peter
town
made that,
council.
Peter made that revision, if I'm mistaken.
Yeah, the planning board forwarded the draft to the town council. That revision will be made and the town council, they may be actually receiving it on Monday night. I'm not sure if that's on the docket, but in any event, it'll be received by the council coming up pretty soon in order to advertise.
Thank you, Ron.
Stay tuned. In a year or so, Art, they'll have a hearing on it.
Tree Commission?
Pardon?
Tree Commission, any report?
Yes, I do have something to say. I don't know if you saw the article on Paul Lamond.
Very nice. Very
It
nice.
is lovely. Many of you did know him. He was
He's a
a
great guy.
lovely, lovely gentleman.
He
And
was.
he is responsible for many of the plantings of trees here in Middletown. Over 1,000 trees and have been planted so far. And it's really wonderful that he's getting some recognition and there will be hopefully soon a tree planted perhaps in the Middletown Park in his honor. And I think that we should all recognize him as a wonderful individual. The second thing is that for the second or third year in a row, the Tree Commission has been awarded the honor of being called Tree City. And that is quite a special honor, and it takes some hard work on the Tree Commission part. And you'll see some signs around town that says Special Tree City. And that's an honor for Middletown. So they've been very, very active and they're a wonderful group.
Oh, congratulations. Thank you. And thank the Tree Commission for working for that, BJ. That is great news.
Mhm. I think so.
Open Space and Fields.
They continue to discuss items like the access to the valley trails. They want to see if they can put in another access point for the valley trails because there's potentially some funding there, for it. They're discussing pickleball court, at Linden, where the former Linden Park is. And then they're discussing I guess you call it Earth Week, which is, I guess, in April. They're talking about special activities for that. And then the other item they discuss is property scoring to try to, determine, if there's open land in the town, its potential for recreational use and so forth. So I guess they give it a score, and then, and it might have some priority for acquisition by the town or some other group. So that's it.
Do you need a helmet for pickleball?
I don't know. I never played it, so they say anybody could play it. You could be on crutches and play it, so I don't think you have to have great mobility, which would help me. So
Conservation Commission, Joe,
They keep canceling, Paul, our meetings, so no updates.
no updates. Thank you. Quidneck Island Planning Commission.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm on it or not. I've never gotten a clear status, but it's really moot because they're going out of business generally. That's where they're headed.
Oh,
That's too bad. Thank you. We have two meetings currently planned, one on April 7th, a public workshop for the airport overlay, and then our regular meeting on April 14th. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, some of you may be wondering why I'm still here. An update on the appointments at the last meeting, town council meeting in February. The town council decided they wanted to interview all of the new applicants for appointment. Those interviews will take place in March, and appointments to the planning board will be made at the first meeting in April. We were also instructed that those persons who were rotating off the board, their terms continue until they are replaced. So my term did not end at the end of February.
Or
not mine
reappointed,
yet.
or reappointed, Paul, not just replaced.
Right,
Well, true.
reappointed, please, Paul. Yes.
Either
please.
or.
do we have a vote on that?
Motion to not let Paul go anywhere.
Second.
Well, let me tell you, they're going to ask you some tough questions.
Oh, I don't think they're going to interview those who are being, who have requested reappointment. They only want to,
Well, I bet they're going to interview, and the first question they're going to ask you is, do you have any experience in this line of work?
well, new appointments.
Get ready, man.
It'll be interesting to hear their answer.
Oh,
Anyway,
right, easy.
Anyway, that's why I'm still here.
Yeah, and Paul,
BJ,
and me too.
yeah, there are two of us, that's right. Sorry,
You,
BJ.
you two are a
That's
pair. You
okay.
come together. It's no one or both of you.
Oh,
Anyway, anything else anyone has to bring up before the meeting? May I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second,
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? Show your hand, please. Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
you're
Be safe out
welcome.
there.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Stay
Bye.
safe.
everybody.